Hello everyone, welcome to the spoiler talk for Doctor Strange, a movie. If you watch my review, I actually very much enjoyed, even to this day, even after the MCU hype has kind of died out because of the fact they've been releasing a lot of garbage. At least in the past couple of years, they've released garbage, okay? I mean, this year's kind of looking up. You know, we had Daredevil, Born Again, Thunderbolts. I haven't seen, by the time of recording this, I haven't seen Fantastic Four, but I'm gonna include that one as well. And then we had the other stuff that also came out this year that wasn't necessarily all that good. Even though Ironheart I haven't seen. So this is being recorded in June, but before Ironheart releases. But even without the MCU rose-tinted glasses, this movie is still a very, very good movie. So let's get into the spoilers. So this movie starts off in a library, of all places. And there's just a librarian who's like putting books away or whatever. And then these people come into the library. Villains! And then the main villain comes in, our baddie, Caecilius. And he beheads the librarian, puts his head in a bucket because why? I don't get why he put the head in the bucket though. That's kind of the weird thing, but still, he takes off the head and then he opens up a special book and he steals a couple of pages and then he runs from the ancient one who appears, and then they basically break the city in half and all the cool stuff that they do with magic. However, sadly enough, he does escape, and then, you know, the city is basically reacting like nothing ever happened. We'll get more into that later on. So let us meet our main hero of the story. We have Stephen Strange, who is I think a surgeon, if I remember correctly. He is a surgeon who is the best of the best of the best. Absolutely, he is doing all the things. He even saves a man's life who was declared dead, so that's fun. However, he has a conference or something to go to, and while he's in the car, he is also looking at his phone because the fact that he gets his next job sent to him, and he has a car crash because don't look at your phone while driving, okay? Don't do that. Keep your eyes on the road, especially during the rain. But he crashes, and afterwards, apparently the doctors have ruined his hands, as he says, and he'll never be able to be a doctor again because of the fact that, you know, he can't do the doctor things anymore because he's got a bit of a shaky hand. So now Doctor Strange needs to figure out a way to get his hands back to normal, and he basically tries everything except for one thing, but that one kind of gets rejected by the surgeon. So everything else under the sun he has tried. However, he did hear a story about a guy who was able to walk after not being able to walk. So eventually he gets it, and then he goes to the guy, and the guy's like, oh hey, yeah, I remember you. You didn't want to take my case. Like, yeah, because you were like, no. Yeah, because you were useless. It wasn't gonna work. No matter what I could have done, I couldn't have been able to save your legs. You never would have been able to walk again. Yet here you are walking. How did you do it? Please, I need your help. And he's like, alright, go to a place called Comertage. So he goes over to different places in search of Comertage, and he eventually is followed by Mordo, and he gets attacked. But Mordo saves him and then takes him to the Ancient One, who shows Stephen Strange some weird stuff. Like, initially it's just the astral form, but then afterwards, like, basically we get the explanation of the multiverse, which is like, ooh, a tease for the next saga, I guess. But yeah, she basically talks about the multiverse and all the magic stuff, and after that he's like, teach me, and she's like, no, because he reminds her of Caecilius, so she can't do it. However, Mordo eventually convinces her, so she allows him back in, and the training begins. And also we meet Wong, who is the head of the library, because Strange is like, how am I supposed to do all this stuff? And the Ancient One's like, well, how were you able to fix the spine or anything like that? And he was like, learn. It's like, well, time to learn. So he goes to the library in order to rent out some books, and yeah, he is apparently a really fast reader because he's got a photographic memory. And Wong does not like jokes. He is not very amused by the jokes that Doctor Strange makes. Meanwhile, Caecilius and the goons, they get a bit of makeup from our main bad guy of the movie, so that's nice. And they are basically trying to bring back Dormammu. We get the official name revealed. However, Stephen Strange, by the way, this movie takes place over the course of the entirety of 2016, and that is how long it takes for him to learn all that stuff. So basically, we have the beginning of the movie, that's at the beginning of the year, the end of the movie, that's at the end of the year, and then in between, basically spring, summer, and fall, we have the whole training of Doctor Strange, which I actually like the fact that we do get to see that. I kind of wish we got to see some more of that, but whatever. I mean, the movie is almost 2 hours long, so maybe they could have added an extra 15 minutes of training. Would have been pretty cool. But anyway, the baddies get some makeup from Dormammu, and then the Ancient One tells him how to really use magic, and it's like, it's kind of like a river. You gotta let the magic flow through you. You don't need to push the magic out. You need to let it out. Let it flow through you. Surrender yourself to its current. Simple as that. However, he's kind of a little bit more iffy about that one, so the Ancient One takes him to the coldest place on the planet. She's like, nice view, right? Alright, find your own way home, and leaves him there. However, he is is able to create the portal, so yay, it worked. I also like how Mordo is like, oh my god, not again. It's like, how many times does she do this? So then we skip forward a long time because now he is way better at magic, and he has actually been excelling at magic faster than anyone else. That is also because later on we get the reveal, or we already got the reveal. I don't know when we got the reveal, but he has a photographic memory, so that's nice. But now Strange needs a new place to train, so the Ancient One opens up the mirror dimension, and that is exactly where she was fighting Caecilius at the beginning of the movie. And that is also a place that doesn't affect anything. Basically, you can twist the world around you entirely. However, the real world will never be affected. So he's now able to train over there. Also, we learned that Caecilius lost everything, and then he went to train with the Ancient One, and then he got seduced by the power of Dormammu. That is basically it. You know, your basic bad guy storyline. And also, he questioned everything, which is kind of reminds you of Doctor Strange himself, because he also questions everything. But also, magic isn't the only thing you need to learn. You also need to learn how to fight, and that is really where Mordo gives him fighting lessons. And he also has this as a weapon called the Staff of the Tribunal, and I'm like, hey, the Ninja Tribunal, because I love the Ninja Turtles 2003 series. Also, while he was training, he's also been stealing books from the library by opening up portals and just taking books, which is actually a funny scene. Anyway, at night, he wants to do more. He wants to learn more, so he goes over to one of the sacred books. He opens it up, the one with the pages missing, and he also grabs the eye of Agamotto, and he uses time magic on an apple, and then he's like, why not use it on the book? So he goes to the book, and he uses the time magic in order to get the pages back. He reads the pages, and he learns about Dormammu, and then Mordo and Wong come in and are like, what are you doing? You're not supposed to be able to do that. You are shattering the dimensions of time itself, and all that stuff, yada yada yada. So then we get a little bit more of a story about Dormammu, and he basically lives in the dark dimension, and he's basically kind of like the devil. He promises you power, but what he takes away is even worse. In that sense, you know, it always costs you. And then Strange's like, look, I don't want to fight in some kind of mystical war. However, then we learn that the London Sanctum has fallen, because there are apparently 3 sanctums: London, Hong Kong, and New York. Obviously, it has to be one of them. Has to be in New York, and they basically keep Dormammu out. So if those sanctums fall, Dormammu will come in. At least, you know, 2 out of 3, as we learn later on in the movie. But the London one has fallen. Strange gets knocked into the New York one. The dude who is supposed to protect that sanctum dies. Doctor Strange in a little bit of a fight against 3 of them, and I'm like, this guy, he's not the best with magic. You people are supposed to be good. How is he winning or even living past all your attacks? I just thought that was actually kind of funny. But eventually he gets saved by the Cloak of Levitation, and it chooses him and fights with him. And Strange also gets rid of 2 of the goons using the like, they got like this doorway where you can switch the dial to go to like a different place, like, you know, water, sand, forest, that kind of stuff. So he traps 2 of them there by changing the dial, and then after that he uses like a thing on Caecilius, which basically traps him. And then Caecilius basically is like, hello, Mr. Doctor, which also, by the way, during that scene we get the Mr. Doctor's thing, which I thought was really funny. But basically Caecilius wants to save the world by handing it over to Dormammu. That is basically the gist of it, and I'm like, you are the stupidest person on the planet. Yes, he may grant you eternal life, but like, the cost is too great. Alright, you're not gonna hand the world over to the devil. You just don't do that. Simple as that. And also, he is very much a timophobe, because he hates time so much, apparently. And he also questions the Ancient One, and he's like, where do you think she gets all the powers, huh? I mean, she got that from the Dark Dimension as well, which, you know, is not yet confirmed. We'll get there later. However, he lost his sling ring, so one of the goons comes back, stabs Doctor Strange, and he is able to barely escape to the hospital, where he asks Christine for help, who fixes him up. And there's also a nice astral battle that happens there as well. And then he gets shocked and blasts the other guy, and is like, do that again, Christine, shock me again. And then he kills the other guy. He comes back to life. Everything is fine. He kind of tries to explain everything to Christine. She doesn't believe him until he opens up the doors, like, here's the portal that I left open. So he goes through the portal, and a little bit of a problem, tiny little problem here. First of all, the guy's dead, so that's good. He gets the Cloak of Levitation back, but our bad guy escaped. That's the tiny little problem I was referring to. So then Mordo comes in and he's like, good job with the Ancient One. And then also Strange immediately starts to question the Ancient One because of the fact that she uses the dark dimension for power. And obviously Mordo is like, oh, you're lying. That's not what happens. Then the Ancient One leaves, and then the New York Sanctum again gets attacked. However, Doctor Strange is able to put everyone in the mirror dimension, trap them there, because he's the like, we shouldn't have to kill anyone if we don't have to. What if there's another way? And technically he's not wrong. If you trap them in the mirror dimension, they can't ever return without one of those sling rings, so the day is saved. However, he's trapped in there with him, so now him and Mordo have to escape, and that escape doesn't really go all that well, but this is such a cool sequence, the way that we're using all the buildings and stuff like that. This is such a cool sequence. But eventually we get saved by the Ancient One, who then has one of those marks on her bald head, and it's like, it's true, you are using the dark dimension power. And after a fight, Caecilius stabs her through one of his own goons in order to kill her, and then he escapes. And then Steven takes the Ancient One to the hospital once again, and she does her best to heal the Ancient One. The problem is the Ancient One then gets into the astral form, so does Doctor Strange. They have a little bit of a conversation. She's like, you know, I've always been able to see the future. I've always been able to predict everything. And I'm like, how did you not predict being stabbed then? But also, she never saw past this moment. This was basically the end of her life, and the world is going to need a new Sorcerer Supreme. And it's like, well, Wong's right there, which is a joke about Spider-Man No Way Home, but we'll get there later. And then the Ancient One died, but not before saying that only if Strange and Mordo work together, they can stop Dormammu. So Strange goes over to Mordo, who has a mental breakdown about everything, and then he asks him for help, and then yes, Mordo will help. So they head over to Hong Kong. However, Caecilius was already there, and Wong was there to defend it, but turns out Wong wasn't really enough, because everything has fallen. So Strange uses the Eye of Agamotto in order to turn back time, and then he allows time to be able to be turned back without him needing to hold out his hand. So everything is basically just going backwards. However, the bad guys also escape from the rewind time, and then we have a fight while time is also rewinding, which is actually really cool. Like, there's one lady goon gets trapped inside of like water. We have another one who gets trapped behind glass. It's great. And also Strange uses the power on Wong as well, so that he can join in on the fight as well. However, the fighting is kind of pointless because of the fact of always the bad guys are stronger. So we need a new way to do this. So Strange flies off to Dormammu, and he goes to make a bargain. But Dormammu, I am here to make a bargain. But before that, he does something with the time stone. And what he does is basically he turns on a loop. Each time he dies, he comes back to bargain. And Dormammu is really angry about this. And then Strange's like, well, I can stop it if you stop attacking Earth to take your goons away. That's the bargain I'm trying to make. Alright, I'll let you go from the time loop, and you will basically take your goons and leave. And Dormammu agrees. So Strange goes back. Dormammu takes his people with him, which are now actually basically in hell. And there you go, the day is saved. However, Mordo hated all of this because of the fact that in order to save everything, we had to bend the laws of nature or even break the laws of nature. So he's like, I'm done, setting up a sequel that happened off screen. And that's the end of the movie. Strange puts the eye back, and we get the big reveal that that was actually the Time Stone, one of the Infinity Stones, once again leading towards the Infinity War movie, which I cannot wait for, but I have to. It's gonna take us a while before we get there, because after this, before we get to the next movie, we have about like 8 more seasons of like streaming shows to watch. We got a lot to do before we get to Thor Ragnarok, which is actually the mid-credits scene. Basically, Thor's there and he's talking with Doctor Strange. It's just like, you know, in Ant-Man, the credit scene when we had like a scene from Civil War. Yeah, this is a scene from Thor Ragnarok, which we will get to eventually. Don't worry about that. And then in the post-credit scene, Mordo goes to the guy who can walk, and then he takes away his magic, and he's like, there are too many sorcerers. And I'm like, this is so disappointing, because all this happened off screen, by the way. This whole movie about him versus Doctor Strange happened off screen. That is officially revealed in the sequel to this movie. It is revealed that that movie happened off screen. Doctor Strange beats Mordo off screen. Maybe even kills him. Who knows? But off screen that happens. Also, about the consequences for using the time stuff. That also happens off screen probably as well. Like, it's just everything happens off screen in between this movie and Infinity War. And it just annoys me so much. I really wish we got to see that, because that would have been a better sequel than the one that this movie actually got, sadly enough. Not the biggest fan for Multiverse of Madness. But that is the end of the movie. And overall, yeah, this movie is great. I love the movie. I thought the movie was really good. I'm a big fan fan. The casting was perfect. I loved everything, especially the magic stuff. However, I will say that the villain is a little bit weak. He has the basic, like, I mean, Dormammu has the basic, like, oh, yeah, but I want to rule the world and everything. You know, I want to consume everything. By the way, I will say that I am actually against the fact that they didn't give him a flame head, though. They give him this, like, really cool effect head, but I really wish he had a flame head, even though there is a little bit of flame in there as well. So he does kind of have the flame still, but it's like, I kind of wish he had more of the comic book design instead of what he has in this movie. But then also you have Caecilius, who's basically like, oh yeah, everything died around me, and now I want time to stop, so I'm gonna join the bad guys. And it's like, it's just the most basic plot line. But overall, the movie, outside of the villain, is absolutely fantastic, and I do highly recommend it. But that has been the spoiler talk of Doctor Strange. So let me know in the comment section down below what you guys thought about Doctor Strange. Spoiler filled, obviously. You can go spoiler as much as you want. And with that being said, thank you all so very much for watching, and I hope you guys have enjoyed. And if you did, please like button, subscribe if you're new, if not already, turn on notifications. Don't forget to check out the Let's Play channel, link in the description and at the end of the video. And I'll see you guys next week when we go for a wee little cloak and a wee little dagger. Bye!